we get into the video, I wanted to share a special tool that David and I have been using for over 2 years to manage our inventory on Amazon. The tool is called SoStocked, and it is a very powerful tool. It's designed specifically for inventory management. If you're in a physical products business selling on Amazon, you need to be in stock, especially with the inventory restrictions lately. This tool is incredibly powerful. If you're having trouble with inventory management, this might be a tool to help you. SoStocked is partnered with Firing Demand, and they've offered our guests, our listeners, a 30-day free trial. So click the link in the video description to get 30-day free trial. On to the video.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing Demand podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Isaac Hetzroni, better known to many as the sourcing guy. Isaac has been involved with manufacturing and supply chain his entire life, as his family owned a small apparel factory in Toronto, and his father has owned an electronics factory in China for the last 20 years. Since then, Isaac has traveled the world sourcing products. He has visited manufacturers of tea in Sri Lanka, bags in Cambodia, shoes in Indonesia, shapewear in Turkey, shirts in Mexico, jewelry in Thailand, and so many more. We are excited to dive into all things product sourcing today. Welcome to the show, Isaac.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So to kind of set the stage for the podcast, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background and your path in the product sourcing world?
Yeah, for sure. So like you mentioned, I kind of grew up as like a sourcing baby from being like a little kid, working in the factories, helping out, started to have a love for everything manufacturing. About 6.5 years ago, I started my sourcing agency called Imprint Genius, and we've been helping companies source products overseas and make the whole process a whole lot less scary. And then recently I started the Sourcing Guy, which is a whole content series all around, helping demystify product sourcing, make things, like I mentioned earlier, way less scary. It doesn't have to be such a massive undertaking. We can help, find some amazing suppliers and, remove that headache from everyone's day-to-day.
That's awesome. So before we get into sourcing, in the intro, I'm sure a lot of the listeners were like, holy cow, Isaac's been traveling the world. Like a couple of maybe one or two of your favorite countries that you've been to, whether it's like, while you're sourcing or whatever, just to share with the listeners who have not been jet setting the world.
My favorite country, like the coolest factories, I feel like I saw some amazing factories in Cambodia. You think that when you think of Cambodian factories, you're probably thinking of sweatshops and dirt floors, but it was the complete opposite. Amazing infrastructure and schools and daycares built into them, and fully carbon neutral factories. They're really, really cool to see all the innovation that are kind of going on. A lot of that has to do with foreign owners. So when you're working with a lot of Chinese factories, you're going to see Chinese-based owners, right? But when you're working with factories that are in a lot of these other countries, you're going to see a lot of times European owners that they're going to be coming in and opening up, starting lives there, opening up factories there, and bringing a lot of kind of more westernized ideals about work-life balance, etc. So that was, seeing a lot of these cool types of factories in Sri Lanka and Thailand, Cambodia, these kinds of places was a huge shock to me. I'm excited to, create more content around that and make it easier for people to source outside of China as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would think of Cambodia as huts and villages and stuff. And you're saying, oh, they have carbon neutral factories. That's kind of crazy and cool. So thanks for sharing. So we'll get right into it. So sourcing, if you've got a physical products business, you need products. You need to launch them. Products have a life cycle. They go away. You launch new ones. And so what are some of your top tips for beginners or even seasoned physical products business owners on sourcing products? What do people get wrong? And what are a couple of tips that they can improve on?
Yeah. So I'd say that some of the biggest things people get wrong are, from a product side, always thinking you have to custom develop a product every time. Yes, there's tons of advantages for custom development. It depends on your market. There are so many amazing private labelable products out there. If you are consistently innovating and staying on top of trends, I think, especially when you're starting out, it's way better to go and take a product and make slight modifications to it, work off the existing product catalog and launch a product into the market. And then once you get some more traction, come out with a version 2 that has a lot more customizability or additional features that you really understand the market, versus going through and being like, I need to reinvent XYZ product, all new custom molds. I need to add all these new features, when most of the time, you're almost making a guess about what the customer actually wants. You don't understand the product and the development pieces around that. And then you're going to go and then there's going to be all these different issues and they're going to come with the custom manufacturing, right? The more complexity you kind of create for yourself, the more things that can go wrong within the manufacturing process. That's like one of the biggest mistakes I'd say. And the other mistake is not hiring inspection agencies to manage your production. So out of all the horror stories I hear about manufacturing and issues with overseas vendors, pretty much every time I ask, did you hire an inspection agency? And the answer tends to be no. And inspection agencies, for people, the listeners who don't know what that is, there are companies that you can hire for about $100 to $250 a man day, and they act as your representatives, and they'll go into the factory pre-production, during production, post-production. You give them a tech sheet, a spec sheet essentially of like your product and all the things to check, and then they're gonna go and make sure that product's perfect, that blue is the exact blue you're looking for, that everything's packed right. Most of the time they're gonna find these little issues, and then they're gonna fail the factory. They're gonna make them fix it, and then you're gonna it might delay your production a week, 2 weeks, but you're gonna end up getting a product that you actually paid for. So
that's awesome. So just to kind of package that up, two things that Isaac just mentioned. So number one is simplify and speed to market. And so just don't make a ton of modifications to a product. Just maybe pop your label on there, make a few tweaks, and get it to market, and then worry about improving it down the road. And so simplify and speed to market. And the second one is inspections. Make sure you do post-production inspection before you ship your products, and it's going to save you a massive headache down the road. So that's awesome, Isaac.
I do have a follow-up question on the inspection. So what are best practices for that? Because I'm thinking of, say you order 10,000 units. When they're done, ready to go out the door, is probably not the right time to identify the wrong color blue. So at what point is it best for them to come in?
Yeah. So if you can, let's say you can only afford one inspection, I would say about like 3/4 of the way through production, like towards the end of production, where it hasn't gone through like the packing and all that kind of stuff and gone through fit, but kind of past finishing. That's if you're only going to hire like one person for one man day. You can obviously hire multiple times through the process, but you have to think about like how complex is my product and like where are the issues going to arise. So for the wrong color blue, if you order a pre-production sample, right, and you're getting pictures of production through production. Yeah. So that's going to help, prevent those kind of issues on like coloration and like you not seeing, you sending a blue and then seeing a different blue. Yeah. It depends on how complex your production is. It depends on all the different things, but yeah, I'll go about 3/4 towards the end.
Okay. That makes sense. Most people that get into e-commerce, this is how their first year goes. They take a course or watch some YouTube videos. They go on to Alibaba and start sourcing their products or trying to source their products. And it is almost assumed that you will be sourcing out of China. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on sourcing out of China versus sourcing from kind of the rest of the world?
Yeah, I'd say that 9 times out of 10, sourcing out of China when you're getting started is the way to go. China is still the king for any type of manufacturing. You're going to be able to work off the lowest MOQ. They're going to have most catalog type manufacturing. So there's 2 kinds of manufacturing out there in my categorization. There's factories that they're going to work based off of their own designs and catalog stuff, and they're going to do a lot of private labeling, versus custom manufacturing. They're going to have a general product niche. You're going to give them a detailed spec sheet and tech pack, and they're going to source the materials and manufacture, based off of that. So a lot of countries outside China, like that's the advantage, because you're going to go and use them for custom manufacturing, and you're going to have massive savings on your cost of labor. But your raw materials and a lot of stuff is still going to come from China or other places. So when you're getting started, like China is great. Now there is a variant to that, right? If you can find really unique product that's not being manufactured in China, right? Manufactured based off of a local economy, right? Like some type of special dried fruit from Brazil, or some type of specialized like leather product, from like South America, all these other places. You can find a domestic product that's like very popular, and you can find manufacturers within the local region and then bring that in. And then that's going to be kind of your differentiating factor. Like that's a great way to start with a lot of these other types of countries and sourcing from those countries. And then a lot of times those are the best products and the successful products that we hear about, changing the, US market, and we'll talk more about this, but Alibaba is a fantastic fantastic tool if you know how to use it. That's what I got to say.
Can we dive into that a little bit more? Because I think here's how I use Alibaba. I type in one keyword and hit search, and I start scrolling, and so I may be doing it wrong. So what is the appropriate way to use Alibaba?
So Alibaba is a search engine, right? You have all these different factories within the search engine. So you're going to go and search up socks, right? And you're going to have all these different options that are going to come around. You have to learn about how to filter through those results to find, the ideal vendors. One of the easiest tips I can kind of give is, instead of searching based on product, search based on suppliers. So instead of looking socks and you see a bunch of product stuff, look up socks and change the tab to manufacturers or suppliers. And then you're going to start being able to filter based off of sock manufacturers. You want to typically work with a firm that specializes in the product type. So then also you're going to be going through, building through sock manufacturers and judging them on the manufacturing level, right? You can then go to the side and start seeing, what are their main export countries? What certifications do they have? What is their yearly output, right? Are they Alibaba verified? Then you can go into each individual product listing, start going through the pictures, start seeing like the products that they have. If you're looking for socks, but they're also selling water bottles and hats and all these other, products, like, okay, this is probably a trading company. This probably is an actual manufacturer. And that's majority of Alibaba is going to be trading companies. So what people do is they search up socks. They go through the first 3 pages when there's 1,000 pages of socks. They hit up the manufacturers that come up first. They talk to them. Half of them are trading companies. And they really didn't do any vetting of the actual factory themselves. They just source some product. Sometimes people don't even order sample. They just order right off that. That's their first experience ordering from Alibaba. They get a bunch of miscolored socks that have a bad imprint or whatever it is 1 month late, and they're like, Alibaba's the worst. Damn, don't go on there.
Yeah. So just to kind of like circle back and package that up a bit. And so David mentioned typing in, we'll go with socks, and then it pops up and there's 1,000 vendors that have listed their products for socks. And so on the left-hand side, there's filters. And so there's like Alibaba verified, how many years they've been manufacturing, what certifications they have, all of that stuff. And so you're saying like kind of toggle those filters on what you're looking for, and it'll like upgrade you, and hit filter, and it's only going to it's going to weed out most of the other stuff, right? And then kind of go from there. And then whether trading companies are probably not the best, but we deal with a couple of them, and it depends on, I think, like sometimes they'll work in certain situations, but it's definitely better to go to the factory because you're going to cut out that middleman. That's really cool. So anything else on Alibaba, David?
Isaac, can you define a trading company? I'm sure there's probably a couple people listening that may not be familiar with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't have all bad things to say about trading companies. I do run one. With that said, a trading company is a company there's different kinds, right? But it tends to be a middleman, right? A person in between that is going to be, you're the representative, and then they're going to be helping you source the product. Now, there's different kinds, and there are tons of advantages for using different trading companies, right? I think the best kinds of trading companies, are going to be ones that are going to be specialized within a niche, right? So if you find a trading company that's specialized specifically in baby products, right? And you need to launch a bunch of SKUs in the baby product category. It's not just one. And you just start with a lot of lower MOQs, and, you want to have kind of consistency across it. Using a trading company that does baby products, that's all they do, can be a really, really great tool, because they're going to have lower MOQs and working with the factories directly, because they're grouping together lots of orders. They have these large relationships, and these factories don't want to work with John that hit them up on Alibaba and wants 200 pieces, but they're fine to go work with their consistent trading company, right? Group all the orders together, and, they're speaking Chinese, and it works out, right? So that's where, a lot of times trading companies can come in handy. I think you can sort of get to a level, like, we don't work with trading companies anymore, right? Because we just need another level of control. We want to have the relationship directly with the factory. We're going to handle all of our own freight forwarding, customs clearance. We'll get to that level. Now, we're a little different on the trading company side. We're a US-based trading company. So what that means is we're a US company, and we act as a US-based vendor. So the biggest thing is that, like, our customers can sue us if we don't deliver the right product the right time. It's kind of funny to say that, but it's kind of the truth. That's like why people come to us, is because you're going to have like an actual actual guarantee that the product's going to be exactly what you wanted, and then we charge for that level of comfort.
No, I think that was excellent. And yeah, we also use trading companies on certain one-off products, and it works well. And they can get lower MOQs, make rapid changes to the product, act as an interface with a factory that might not have an English-speaking sales staff or something like that. And so it's very helpful, I think, in certain situations. I've got a question, and this is a little bit different. Anytime we have an expert on, I try to think of like a real life actual exercise. And so you mentioned something earlier. I was like, if you're selling, like instances where you wouldn't go to China if you had something. And so in my office, I have it's like a cowhide rug, and it's like some type of an Australian cow rug. And so with your experience, if I came to you and said, hey, Isaac, I want to sell these Australian cowhide rugs, what would be your process of finding manufacturer or direct vendor of getting those? Like, what in your brain, like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, for sure. So let's break down the fundamentals of manufacturing product sourcing. So your main variables are going to be raw materials, labor cost, and specialization. And with a special call out to taxes and duties and tariffs and free trade agreements. The first thing we're going to look at is raw materials, right? Raw materials, how complex is the production? How heavy of a raw material based product is it? So we're talking about raw cowhide. That's pretty much just a raw material, right? It needs to go through processing, it needs to go through a bunch of other processes, but it's very raw material intensive. An example of another one would be like a full cotton hoodie, right? Like Pakistan's an export of cotton. You need a lot of cotton to produce it, and they have low labor costs. Like that's great for that, but it's trying to make a laptop, right? That's tons of components. The raw materials are going to vary a lot. Like China is going to be a better place for the specialization, right? The factories in China are very good at manufacturing electronics. In Pakistan, they're not very good at manufacturing electronics. They're just not trained on it. They haven't been in that space for that long. They can't get their components, right? You need all the components that go into that core product to be close by for the manufacturing. And then, labor costs. So how labor intensive is the production of the product? And then kind of playing that around. So if you're manufacturing something like, jackets with lots of different pieces and, details and all that kind of stuff, going somewhere like Myanmar and Cambodia where really low labor costs and you maybe have a high enough volume, like that can be great. So then we can also look at, your tariffs, your taxes, etc. So am I shipping into, let's say, the US, right? And maybe there's a massive tax on these kinds of products if I'm shipping it from China, but maybe if we're manufacturing in Australia or all these different places, right? Maybe there's a free trade agreement, right? Where there's, no taxes or we just have to pay duties. There's no additional tariff on top of it. So you kind of take all these different variables, you weigh it all out, you look at the volume you're looking for, and you can try to shape the best overall solution and the best supply chain.
Okay. No, I really like that. Kind of how you broke it down into raw materials, fees, taxes, and then just normal logistics, and then kind of map out a game plan for all of that. What's the best one for all of that? So thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Over to you, David.
So when it comes to product sourcing, of course, there's going to be people that work with professionals such as you. There's also going to be people that insist on doing it themselves. And so I'm curious, what is the best way to find suppliers in some of these other countries outside of China? For instance, in Cambodia or in South America. Is there an Alibaba type website, or is there any global website that has a global network of manufacturers?
So Alibaba does have other countries now as well, but it's not super robust. From our perspective, the way we found it, you can go through commerce boards. So reaching out to the local, Sri Lankan Commerce Board, go through their websites. You can see all the different top suppliers, see their contact information. You can try to reach out to them. I'd say it's about 50-50 shot if the Commerce Board's active or not in these countries, and they're actually going to help you. I went as brash as you just book the nicest hotel you can in the capital city of a country. You go up to the lounge and you wait for someone that looks, non-native to walk through the door. And I literally remember being in the Phnom Penh Marriott and just waiting and go out to people and be like, hey, I run a sourcing company. I don't know anyone in Cambodia. Do you know anyone in manufacturing? And then almost every person that walks through the door would be like, yeah, I know someone. Yeah, I'm in manufacturing. And then I just lined up a bunch of meetings over the next 2 days of just people that had factories and knew people that had factories. Because if you think about it, people are at the nice international hotels, you're probably there for business and if it's a manufacturing hub. So it's the more more aggressive way, you can also go through like import records. So there's lots of tools out there now where you can start, there's like, you can map out, you can search for factories, search for different companies. You can see where their shipments are coming from, and then hopefully find these vendors that are in other countries.
Do you have any specifics on what tools you could use to look at import records?
Yeah, so there's a free one called Import Yeti. It's been getting pretty popular, where you can type in different companies. You'll be able to go and kind of see their records of different factories that they're importing from, which is a huge hack. How we've been sourcing for a long time. And then Import Genius is another one that's more expensive. It has a lot more functionality like we have as well. Can get you a lot more countries, etc. Yeah, it's great because you can do a lot less vetting when you're working with existing factories that you know like are already producing a great product that you like in the marketplace, or working with a major brand. The caveat is that a lot of companies are hiding that information. Sometimes it's really hard to reach those factories. Sometimes the factories have massive MOQs. So there's ways to kind of work around it, but it's definitely a great way to source product.
I love that there are tools out there that I can use, but I hate that other people can do that same thing to us. And so what are some ways when you're sourcing to kind of mask that?
Yeah, so you can work with your freight forwarder. It's something that like we offer our clients. So you work with a freight forwarder. You don't act as the importer of record, right? So you can either create like a shell company that acts as the importer of record, or you ask your forwarder, normally like a Chinese-based freight forwarder, to act as the importer of record. So then there's no real record of your company importing the product into the country. So different ways people can kind of search. You can search based on like addresses. You can search based off the company name, the LLC, all that. So if you just hide as much of that as possible, then there's going to be no real trace of you being the company to bring it in.
That's awesome. So I want to circle back on, before I get into my next question, I want to circle back on what you had mentioned earlier, Isaac, of like, I think it's like, I would call it next level like sleuthing, where you fly to Vietnam, you get the best hotel, and you just kind of sit in the lobby and wait. And like, so I'm an introvert, so I don't like do that. And so for you, like I would say like you're the perfect person to like build out a network of connections of people, because if you're going up to random people and saying, hey, I don't know anybody in and you're building that connection, I think that's awesome. I just wanted to call that out because that's not something I would do personally, but like someone building a network of manufacturers, that's an excellent skill set to have. So wanted to call that out. Next question I have is Canton Fair. This is something that everybody, when you're in the physical products business for a long time, everybody hears of this Canton Fair, and I know COVID has kind of knocked it out for the last several years. They went online, who knows what. So can you speak a little bit to that? And then do you recommend people like physical products business owners to go there? Would you recommend them sending you or your team? Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts about the Canton Fair? Actually, can you say like share with the audience what that is and then thoughts about it?
Yeah, for sure. So the Canton Fair, also known as the China Import and Export Fair, is essentially the largest sourcing fair in the world. You have about, I want to say 40,000 different factories represented at the fair. It's massive. It's the size of like 6 Olympic stadiums. I mean, it is so large. And so, yeah, you have all these different booths and the different factories. I'd say it's probably 80% factories, 20% trading companies that have these booths exhibiting their product. And it's the best way to source product. I'm sorry, there's no better way to source than the Canton Fair. I was super disappointed when I just got back from the Canton Fair, actually. I was just in China for about 3 weeks, visiting much of our suppliers and doing the fair, as well as there's two other sourcing fairs as well around that time. And yeah, I met one American maybe the whole time. Like there was no one. Yeah, there were like no Americans there. Every time I go to the booth, they'd be like, American, wow. Like they were so like, they're like, you are represented well. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like this is crazy. But it's like, it's the best place. And I feel like it was a great advantage doing that, right? Because I got to see all the coolest new product, find all the new suppliers, see like what's kind of on the cutting edge. And then we were able to, we were live sourcing for all of our customers. So just taking pictures of product, sending that out. So yeah, obviously you could use a company like us, or just go to China, go to the fair. So there's twice a year. It's April through like beginning of May, as well as in October. And there's 3 phases to the fair. So there's phase 1, which is going to be mostly electronics. You have phase 2, which is going to be consumer goods and like home product. And then phase 3 is going to mostly be apparel, sporting goods, and food-based product. And each phase lasts for 5 full days. So it's a big undertaking, but if you can make it out there, like, I mean, mean, look, you're talking to the factories right there. You're seeing the product in your hand. You're negotiating. You don't have to like bet. You can also like kind of tell how legit the company is, like how nice is the booth, right? How professional are they? They have all the certifications listed on their booths, right? So if you need like VSCI reports, you need to sell into big retail, all that can be done. So
that's awesome. Yeah. So your recommendation is definitely go. One follow-up question: do you speak Mandarin, or does is there English? Like if I was to go there, I don't speak Mandarin. How does that work?
This is my viewpoint on the whole speaking Mandarin thing. If you're talking to a factory and they don't have someone that's able to speak English well with you, they're probably not a good factory for you. Why is that? Okay, because they're probably not selling into the US or Western markets. 99% of the time, okay, you don't want to work with factories that aren't selling to the US market. Why? Because they're not going to, be producing product for your user base. They might not have all the certifications and they're not going to be on, they're a partner for you as well. So you want your partner to be telling you like, hey, this is all the cool stuff that's going on, right? Like I was just visiting like a legging factory. It was like, look at all these cool leggings that we're like developing and producing for the US market. Like this is what's in, like the scrunch butt and this and that, right? If your factory's not selling at that US market and they're selling at the Chinese market, like they're not going to, you're not working together on staying up to date on trends. They might not have import certifications and have experience importing into the US, and it becomes a whole hassle to make sure all the documentation's right. And yeah, so that's kind of my thing. When walking around the show, I had almost no problem speaking English, and then you can use translator apps as well. But my biggest tip is definitely get a few really good VPNs before you get there, because the firewalls are strong and you'll have a very hard time accessing your email and all that kind of stuff.
I think that's excellent advice. David and I have ran into issues over the years where, working with certain factories, they don't have SDS sheets, they don't have import custom records, they don't have any of that stuff. And it's a hassle to be the first. You don't want to be the guinea pig for a company trying to import into the US. So if they're not speaking English, then that's an excellent advice. And the VPN too. You said you had 2 VPNs,
and there were still times where I couldn't get onto my email. I can't get on calls. It's getting tricky. And to talk just one last thing about like the selling it like North America market. Like if you go on Alibaba and they're Alibaba verified, it actually breaks down the percentage of sales that they do like within the different markets. So you can see like 60% of their business is the US, or is it 5%, right? Reference our Alibaba page for talking suppliers to kind of get this information.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool. The Great Wall of China. It's tough to get over that, right? Over to you, David.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk about merch. How can you do merch well in 2023?
I can answer this question pretty well. So because we actually started as a merch company and we still do a ton of, we do a ton of merchandise. We have our own print on demand solution for on like the corporate side of things. It's probably like 40% of our business is still on the merch side. What I'd say is merch is rapidly changing, especially, and the adaptation for on demand is the biggest thing, right? So before, print on demand was, very much like vinegary, low quality, direct to garment printing that was expensive and slow, and you could only use certain type of heavyweight kind of terrible t-shirts to print on, and it was inefficient, and that has changed exponentially in the last 10 years. Nowadays you have these massive $500,000 machines pumping out shirts of fantastic quality. You have all these different types of new decoration methods, from embroidery, direct to film, different types of heat transfers. On top of that, you do laser on demand, you can do full digital printing on demand, sublimation on demand. You have tons and tons of SKUs. Like we have 100,000 print on demand SKUs in our catalog. I guess where I'm getting at with merging smarter is understand like all the capability out there with merchandising, and then try to build a more intelligent supply chain where you're testing lots of different products and finding the ones that work well. And then building a supply chain where when you're doing merch, like run on demand, but then have systems in place. So if you go and you sell 100 of the shirt, don't DTG all 100 shirts. Like have a system where you can go and then batch print those 100, cut your cost basis by 20% and then ship all those out.
So I want to make sure I've got a good understanding of what print on demand is. So this would be a scenario where, say I am sourcing hats. I've got a design, I communicate, we get a sample made, and I'm happy with that. Is it the case where you list that on your website or on Amazon, and then once an order comes through, that's when it is triggered to print?
So either you're going to use existing stock that the vendors are going to have, like they're going to have their Richardson hats and, auto caps and Next Level, New Era and all that kind of stuff. If you're working with the right vendors, you can take your own private stock. So you're going to go and order your own hats, have your blank hat. They're going to sit there and be prepped. And when an order comes through of, I love milk, I don't know, like whatever your design is, then it's going to be embroidered or the patch is going to be put on, and then it's put in the poly bag and shipped out.
That's interesting. And I will admit I'm a recovering accountant. And so I have to point out to our listeners that cash flow constraints is something that a lot of people run into. And if you look at, if we look at how Ken and I run our business, we order from China, pay, and then 90 days later, we have inventory showing up. It is a bit of a gamble on whether that's going to sell. And so I do think that eliminates some risk in that product launching stage and also can lessen the amount of cash outflows that you have.
I think the future are hybrid-based production systems, supply chain systems. So what does that look like? Yeah, you have your inventory of like a lot of your core products that are super, there's massive cost savings for being able to produce everything overseas. And then you supplement, let's say we're running a 25% of your goods are inventory-based product, 60% are going to be on demand. So it's going to be a lot of fill out your catalog, fill out the buying experience, very different from Amazon or Shopify. But let's imagine we're a Shopify vendor, right? You need to have a lot of different products to select from to increase your average cart value. And then you can also have the remaining percentage be kind of like, be print on demand, but the ability to then go into kind of a batch system. So you're going on demand, you're seeing that your ads are scaling, you're seeing that the product's doing super well. Okay, cool. Let's go and screen print or mass produce 100 pieces, and then let's supplement. And it's going past that. Okay, now let's go and buy more inventory overseas. At scale, you can balance this out and then have way, way less excess inventory, way less cash spent on inventory, and then just a more effective supply chain that has less waste. I'm really excited by it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Isaac, let's pivot in a little bit, and can you share with the audience Imprint Genius? What is Imprint Genius, and who does that company serve?
Yeah, so we're a product sourcing and merchandising company. So again, like about half our clients are going to be Amazon sellers, e-commerce brands, aggregators, where we're helping them source stuff on their behalf. The other side is our merch arm. We're working with print-on-demand sellers as well as like mid-market enterprise companies, and we're running their hybrid supply chains, producing their merchandise.
David, anything else you want to cover before we run Isaac through the ringer with the fire round?
No, I just wanted to point out that we'll put links down to Imprint Genius in the show notes. No, let's get into the fire round.
Yes. Isaac, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
What is your favorite book?
Shoe Dog.
I love that book. Have you seen the movie? They just came out with the movie. It's similar to that, but it's pretty good. What are your hobbies?
I like to surf and play paddle.
What is it? Paddle? What's that?
It's kind of like tennis and racquetball combined with walls.
Okay, that's awesome. What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
I love having, the freedom to kind of travel and live on my own schedule, work, a 16-hour day one day and then work a 6-minute day the next.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I'd say how nimble they are, right? Always being able to adapt. I think a lot of people get, they go through failure and then they kind of give up, or they get too comfortable and they don't realize they have to keep on innovating and keep on improving themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that one. David, over to you to close out the show.
If people are interested in working with you, what would be the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, you could reach out to Imprint Genius, go to imprintgenius.com and fill out the form. And if you want to learn about product sourcing yourself and, give that a try before hiring us, I have the sourcingguide.com, which is my free blog where we have tons of articles and guides teaching people all about how to source products overseas, guides for specific countries, how to source from Sri Lanka, Cambodia, etc. And then I'm also launching a full course. A lot of it's going to be free with like an A to Z of how to source products that should be launching in the next few weeks as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and looking forward to staying in touch.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep. Thanks, Isaac.
Thanks for watching this video. If you got some value out of this, would you please hit the like and subscribe button? This is a free way to support the show, and it really helps us build our audience.